What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Honda CR-V Touring. Huge thanks to Honda for providing me here with the refreshed 2020 CR-V to review for you guys today. So for some of the changes here for the CR-V, so there aren't any mechanical changes really, it's all just exterior and interior stuff. And so first off, right up front here, you can see it's got a much bolder look now. You have a redesigned front bumper, redesigned grille, you have the LED headlamps here, and also you have some redone fog lights there as well. And while the pre-refreshed CR-V didn't look bad by any means, this I think gives a little bit more of a modern and aggressive look that I think really suits the styling of this vehicle very well and is very distinctive. It kind of stands out a little bit more while still being very agreeable to most people, I think. Especially also, there's a couple new colors here for 2020, one of them being this new Aegean blue metallic, and man, this color really pops. And you know, these days with so many bland colors, I love that Honda's offering a bright blue and they're offering a bright red, and they also have their fair share of the normal, you know, bland colors if that's more your speed, but I really love this color. It just really looks really good. So anyway, other things going down to the sides here, you have the familiar proportions of all the other CR-Vs over the past few years. Still a very spacious and, you know, very usable space here, of course being an SUV and whatnot. Going out to the back there's also a few tweaks. So the tail lamps there are a little bit darker now than they were before, and you have a restyled rear bumper there, and you still have the exhaust tips there in the lower part of the rear bumper. If you go for the hybrid version, which I reviewed a couple of months ago, that gets a unique rear bumper which has some hidden exhaust pipes and a little bit of a different look there. But both look really good in my opinion, although I think I prefer the hybrid looks a little bit better. They also get blue badging and different wheels and things like that. The wheels on this one are very nice though. Now on the touring trim here, you get 19-inch wheels instead of the 18 inches you used to get on touring trim, so that should also give you maybe a little bit of a sportier feeling than what you got previously. Now you have some lower sidewalls here, but still overall, you know, the CR-V continues to look very good, but I think that all the little changes they made here for 2020 are a really nice improvement. All right, so starting to go for a drive. The CR-V has Honda's very nice key here that's just got a really nice weight to it, just a few buttons there on the back. If it'll focus, there we go. And so, you know, nice and simple, but just has a really great weight to it. Nice and small too. I really appreciate that about it. And so yeah, anyway, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And if you're curious to hear about the interior of the CR-V, my wife and I actually did a full in-depth interior review in a separate video. I'll link it above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all the details on this interior. But overall, it's a pretty nice place to be. You know, they just do such a good job with Honda interiors for the most part. Infotainment's a little iffy, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on. But otherwise, you know, just a really good use of space and overall pretty nice place to be. All right, so setting off in the CR-V. Well, one of the first things you notice is the visibility in here is really good. You have a nice high seating position like you want in an SUV of this type, and so you know, you have a really large windshield, very easy to see out of. You do have a speaker here down by the bottom of the A-pillar. That's one thing that isn't great, but honestly you're sitting up so high that it's very easy to see around that. You also have some of the widest side mirrors that I've ever seen, I think, in an SUV of this class. It just gives you a really good view out of your, you know, side mirrors there, and also, you know, you have blind spot monitoring to further help with that safety there, but really a good job there. And other things to note here, you have a little bit of a weightier steering in the CR-V. It's kind of similar to like the Mazda CX-5, definitely a little heavier than the Nissan Rogue and the Toyota RAV4. You have also a nice, a little bit dead brake pedal, but you know, could use a little more feeling in my opinion, but it does mean you can be very smooth with your braking because it's not super sensitive for the braking. Throttle response is also actually one of the things that's been standing out to me more and more in my week of driving this vehicle is that it's kind of lethargic, and combined with the CVT, it just feels a little lazy and hesitant to accelerate because of the way just the tuning is done. But now, you know, getting up to speed here on a main road, the whole experience just feels a little bit just hesitant. It's just like, it doesn't seem very sprightly. It's just like it doesn't want to accelerate. You really have to kind of goad it into, you know, accelerating, because otherwise it doesn't really want to do it, it seems. And I think that's just throttle tuning. You know, it's just, you have to push the throttle down I would say it feels like a third of the way before you even start getting any kind of substantial response out of it. And so it just means you got to be a little heavy-footed with your inputs in order to, and that goes for the brake pedal as well. Everything is just, you have to be a little more deliberate with your foot to, get the braking or get the acceleration you're looking for. And that's just something that, again, is a little different than some of the others, which have a little bit more of a sensitive setup. It's a little more driver-friendly, I guess. But another nice thing to mention, though, I have to say, is that this vehicle is so refined. The CR-V, it's really a quiet interior, and it's a very solid feeling going down the road as well. And it actually feels a little more solid than some of its competition. Stuff like the RAV4 can feel a little tinny and has more road noise and wind noise, but there is no sport mode here in the CR-V. We'll put the transmission into its sport mode. Let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. A little bit of a delay, and then it gets up and starts moving pretty nicely. So it's not eager to accelerate. Again, this engine just combined with this CVT, again, they clearly tuned it for relaxed commuter style driving. So not very enthusiastic. Even in sport mode for this transmission, I thought it would be a little more eager. But this CVT is still a little all over the place. It's not as great as some of the other transmissions in some of the competing vehicles. Anyway, the power here in the CR-V is delivered through a 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. It does 190 horsepower and 179 pound-feet of torque, and it'll do 0 to 60 in about 7.6 seconds. And so that's right in line with most of the other competitors, but I think with some of the competition, they feel a little more eager. So for example, like the RAV4, now that has a normal 8-speed automatic transmission and a 200 horsepower 4-cylinder, but there's no turbos on that engine. So that engine is a little more direct and immediate. It's not relying on any turbos. It just makes that engine sing and goes for the gold. And even the Mazda CX-5 has a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder as well, and with that, uses a normal 6-speed automatic, and that makes for a much more responsive combination. And even though the engine has very similar power, it's very torquey feeling, and this has almost the same amount of torque as far as numbers go. And they say peak torque comes on at I think 2,000 RPMs all the way to 5,000 RPMs is when you get that peak power, but this just doesn't feel like it has that. It just still feels a little lethargic, and again, I'm just wanting everything to be a little more eager than it is, and everything about this just feels a little more relaxed than I would like. But I still am so impressed with the refinement of this vehicle, and so now we're on a really rough road that generates lots of road noise, and obviously you hear it a lot more than you did on the other road there, but honestly it's still really not bad for, again, a road as rough as this is. It really does a good job of keeping it pretty subdued in here. But we're coming up to some corners here. Let's see how the CR-V handles them. Turning it into a corner here, and it's pretty flat, honestly, for just a normal compact SUV. Nothing sporty in its setup. It is really quite good. I think part of that might be these larger 19-inch wheels now, so you have a little bit less of a sidewall than you would with 18s, and so I'm actually really impressed. And interestingly, it feels like you can start to get a hint of where the limits are whenever you really start to push it. But honestly, it feels pretty good in corners. I'm pretty happy with this handling for the type of vehicle this is. Again, I still think the CX-5 is a little more fun in its handling. I think it feels like it gives you a little more confidence in corners, and that combined with the more responsive transmission and engine in the CX-5 still makes that my favorite driving crossover in this segment, I think. But this, I think, is a fairly close second. I think this actually feels a little bit better than the RAV4 in corners. I think it actually feels also like it has a little bit of a sportier feel to it than the Nissan Rogue. The Nissan Rogue is actually pretty good with its handling as well, but I think this, whenever you push this a little more, it might feel like it has higher limits than what you have with the Rogue. So one good thing is, these aren't too heavy, so I think that's certainly one of the things that's helping the handling is, these weigh just under 3,600 pounds. I think it's like 3,572. Overall, I would crown this my second place as far as sporty handling characteristics for a compact, family crossover. And I'm actually enjoying, so the steering felt a little heavy at lower speeds, but here at some higher speeds, it does kind of lighten up a tiny bit. One thing though, so this CVT, whenever this was first introduced in the CR-V a few years back, it was praised for having some normal shift points and things like that. I didn't review the pre-refresh version of the CR-V, so I can't do a comparison myself. But what I will say is the CVT kind of feels similar to the one in the Civic, where it still likes to be all over the place. It doesn't have quite as normal shift points as you get with some of the other stuff. I mean, honestly, Subaru CVT is about the same. I think honestly it just comes down to whether or not you want a CVT. If you don't want a CVT, you still have the RAV4 with its normal automatic. You also still have the CX-5 with its normal automatic. So if you like normal shift points and all that kind of stuff, I would recommend one of those, because this still has a little bit of that rubber band kind of feel. I mean, it does kind of kick down and there are some distinct shifting points, but then once it decides on a ratio, it still does kind of vary a little bit and you still get a little bit of that rubber band sensation. So not in love with the transmission here either. If you want a little bit more power out of your CR-V, I think that the hybrid version is actually my preferred powertrain of choice for these vehicles. So the hybrid version of the CR-V is new here for 2020, and I did a full review on that, so you can go watch that if you want to hear all the details on the hybrid setup. But you do get a couple dozen more horsepower than what you get here with this, and you get the immediacy of an electric boost that kind of helps you out in the early parts of acceleration there. And so you actually have more power with the hybrid. You get way better fuel economy with the hybrid. And I'll get into the fuel economy here in a second, compare the two. But I mean, just the hybrid to me is, every time I was driving this vehicle over the course of the week that I had it, every time I was like, I would so much rather get the hybrid. I would so much rather, I wish I was in the hybrid, not this normal gas one, because the hybrid just is such a better sensation to me and such a better driving experience, which is kind of impressive. You would think the hybrid maybe would be, you know, the eco version that isn't as fun, but actually it's quite the opposite. The hybrid is the one to get if you care about having a little bit more straight line performance. And you know, I didn't get a good chance to drive that on back roads to really test its handling. It'll be a little bit heavier with its hybrid setup, which shouldn't really change a whole lot. So honestly, I think, you know, handling should be pretty comparable too. Also, while I was doing some highway driving here in the CR-V, I got to try out their adaptive cruise control system for the CR-V, and I've already tried Honda's system, the Honda safety system that they have. I've already tried it in you know, the Civic, and I've tried it in the Accords and stuff like that, and it's very similar in its operation here as far as, you know, the way it works and everything. So they have a lane keep assist system that's really quite good. I did test it on, we have some S-bends on the highway, and it's a full speed highway, divided and everything, but has S-bends, and it did fail to keep me in my lane on that S-bend, and so it was requiring more steering input than what the vehicle itself could provide. But aside from that, on any other milder turns and any other times of driving on the highway, it was able to actually steer itself very well, and it didn't ping pong or anything like that. Obviously, you still have to keep your hands on the wheel, and still, you know, it looks for a little bit of torque and a little bit of a resistance from your hand from time to time to make sure you still have your hands on the wheel. So again, not self-driving or anything even remotely close, but it does a very good job of easing you know, the amount of work you have to do of steering on the highway on long drives. Just keep in mind that it is not foolproof, and like I said, on some of the really tight, you know, windy S-bends here in western Pennsylvania on our highways, it will still you know, fail to keep you in your lane. But it's not unique to this. Hyundai, their system also struggles to keep me in the lane. Very few systems actually can handle those S-bends very well. Volvo's system is one of the few that has enough steering power to you know, do those S-bends completely on its own, without my intervention or anything. But I mean, for, I would say, you know, 90 to 95% of highways, this system is going to do a really good job with its lane keeping assist. I didn't have any false alerts from the automatic emergency braking, and also interesting thing is with the road departure warnings, it never actually gave me a warning. And obviously I wasn't crossing over the double yellow, but a lot of other cars, whenever I test them, they will go off randomly if I'm getting a little bit too close or a little hypersensitive. Subaru is famous with their eyesight system just constantly pestering you. This system did not bother me, and it also remembers your preferences between key cycles. So I had the lane departure warning turned off for a couple of days, and it never turned itself back on. So if you really don't like all this stuff, you can hit a button, keep it off, and never have to worry about it. So that's also great, that even though this stuff is standard, at least it's defeatable. So unfortunately, you do have to pay for it, you know, with, you know, the slightly higher prices over the previous model years. But you know, at least you don't have to constantly have the technology annoying you if you don't want it. But now settling down and just kind of cruising, doing your normal commuting, this is where the regular version of the CR-V will be totally fine, and for most people, will be really, I think this is a little step above the RAV4 as far as refinement, and even just small things like the steering wheel leather feels nicer here than it does, and even the top trims of the RAV4, and that's something you're touching every day, and that's just a very minor detail, but it just, I guess, kind of illustrates how this just has a little more refinement than the RAV4. And so if you're willing to deal with the CVT here, and the fact that this has an infotainment system that isn't quite as easy to use as the RAV4 in my opinion, there are some drawbacks to the CR-V here, but if you're willing to compromise in those areas, I think that this is a little nicer feeling than the RAV4. And there's a couple other little things, like the shifter here is a little just rattly. It doesn't actually rattle when you're driving, it just feels a little loose and not as nice as the push button shifters you get in the hybrid as well, which is another reason to go for the hybrid. But anyway, while we're talking about going for the hybrid, clearly this is something weighing on me. I think the hybrid is a no-brainer at this point, and they priced it so well that it's not even much of an upcharge. It's only $1,200 more than a comparably equipped non-hybrid all-wheel drive CR-V. All of the hybrid versions get all-wheel drive as standard, I believe, so that's why the price difference, it's larger if you're comparing a two-wheel drive version, but if you're doing the all-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive, $1,200 more for the hybrid, and I think that $1,200 is a no-brainer for many different reasons. Like I said, you get a little bit of a nicer interior here with shifter buttons instead of this shifter lever. You get more power with the hybrid, and you get way better fuel economy. This non-hybrid CR-V is rated at 27 in the city, 32 on the highway, and 29 combined. In my driving here, I've been averaging 26.2 mpg, so almost that city number. I did do close to a 50-50 split of highway and city, probably a little more city than highway, but I was hoping to at least be getting that city number. I'm a little bit beneath that. Not a huge deal, because I do often struggle to get even the city number in my weeks with vehicles here, so lots of stop and go usually in my driving, and so 26.2 isn't bad, I think, for an SUV of this size and stuff, so not a big deal there. But just the fact that this touring trim, the best you'll see is 32, and the actual worst you'll see in the hybrid version. The hybrid is rated, like I said, this is a 27 in the city. The hybrid is 40 in the city, 35 on the highway. So maybe on the highway you're not going to get as huge of an increase if you're really doing 100% highway cruising in your CR-V constantly. Then maybe the hybrid won't pay off for you. But if you do even a little bit of city driving, that hybrid version is going to pay for itself with that extra $1,200 in no time. Plus you get the extra power and everything else. And so yeah, and actually whenever I reviewed the hybrid version, now that I was driving that in a different area and doing a little bit more stop and go driving and stuff like that, but I was easily seeing like 44 mpg without even trying in the CR-V. Some of the guys that were hypermiling it on the press launch for the CR-V hybrid, they were getting close to 50 mpg out of the hybrid CR-V. So even at my driving, doing 44 mpg versus in this I'm getting 26.3. Again, not a direct comparison, not the same driving or anything, different roads, but it just illustrates the huge gap. And we're not talking about 3 or 5 or even 10 mpg. We're talking about almost 20 mpg difference, and for only $1,200 more. And so that's why, while this CR-V is fine and it's very competitive with everything else in its class and whatnot, I just think it's a no-brainer. Go for the hybrid version. I would 100% go for the hybrid without even thinking twice about it. But speaking of pricing here, so this is the fully loaded all-wheel drive touring trim, and this one is $35,870 as tested. This is basically maxed out, fully loaded, as high as you can get a CR-V. Now the hybrid version, you can get a little bit higher, again, about $1,200 higher for one of those, but that's about as high as you get as far as pricing for the CR-Vs here. And there are some nice features here in this touring trim, like you have the wireless charging pad, you have the kick to open rear hatch, which is hit or miss. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Certainly would not go up to the touring trim for that. Wireless charging pad works okay, but this actually isn't too rubberized, so your phone slides around on this pad a lot, and so that's not great either. So honestly, I would be happy with an EXL trim, except the only way you get a heated steering wheel is in this top touring trim, which is really annoying. You can't get it on anything other than a fully loaded CR-V. And interestingly, another reason to go for the hybrid actually gives you the heated steering wheel in the EXL trim. And so to me, that means, I think I'd be totally happy with an EXL hybrid. Get the heated steering wheel, you're good. Now, you do downgrade stereos. That's the last little thing I mentioned. This one has a 9-speaker, 330-watt stereo in these touring trims, which is very good. Sounds great. I was actually really impressed with the vocals and the clarity of it. It is a very good system. I haven't tested the lower system, but the other system you can get in the CR-V that's on anything but the touring trim is an 180-watt 8-speaker system. So you're only down 1 speaker here with those bass systems. It's obviously less wattage. Again, I would have to listen to it to really judge, but I think if you're not obsessed with having an amazing stereo, then you could probably be very happy with an EXL hybrid like I would. Those would be about $32,000 for one of those. I think that makes a lot more sense. As far as pricing goes, you're going to get way better fuel economy, so in the long run you're saving a lot of money there. That would be the one that I would pick if I was speccing one of these myself. Overall, you can't go wrong, regardless of what CR-V you're going for. I mean, there's really good value in all the different trims. It just depends on what features you want. You can go in their configurator and see, what you would get and what you need to get. Overall, yeah, the CR-V is a very impressive vehicle, and like I said, I still think the CX-5 handles better, is a little more fun to drive, and would be my pick from a driving standpoint. But then the CX-5 also doesn't have a great infotainment system, with them forcing you to use a knob and having a convoluted menu system. This is at least easier to use, even if it is smaller and a little slower. But I think the Toyota has them both beat as far as ease of use with their touchscreen and larger screen and stuff. So, so there's trade-offs everywhere. I don't think anything in this segment is perfect, but I think this is certainly towards the top of its class and definitely worth a test drive and worth checking out if you're curious about it. Definitely go watch the interior review that my wife and I did if you want to hear more details on this interior and a little more in-depth discussion about it. But otherwise, let me know your thoughts on the CR-V in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.